Welcome to the latest edition of the Mind-Gut Conversation podcast, a place to learn about new ideas from thought leaders in the area of optimal health and the science of mind-gut microbiome interactions. Today, I have the great pleasure to speak to Dr. Rima Kaddurah, an amazing scientist and major driving force in the search for more effective treatments for Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Kaddurah-Daouk is a graduate of the American University of Beirut Department of Biochemistry with subsequent training at Johns Hopkins, Massachusetts General Hospital, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She has been a seminal force in the development of applications of metabolomics, or the study of metabolites, in the medical field. She co-founded Metabolon, a leading biotechnology company for applications in metabolomics, the measurement of metabolites, and two other biotechnology companies. With significant NIH funding, over 40 grants funded past 15 years, she established and leads large research consortia. She currently leads and coordinates an international multi-center research consortium, the Alzheimer's Disease Metabolomics Consortium, or ADMC, which consists of more than 120 scientists from over 30 academic institutions. The ADMC, funded by the National Institute on Aging at the NIH, and in partnerships with the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, is one of 6 consortia under the Accelerating Medicines Partnership for Treatment of Alzheimer's Disease initiative, set to respond to President Obama's challenge, national plan to address Alzheimer's disease, to treat or prevent it by 2025. Rima has published over 140 peer-reviewed scientific publications, leads a large number of active NIH grants, and in 2018, she ranked as the highest funded researcher in departments of psychiatry nationally. She has more than 60 patents or patent applications on use of metabolomics for the diagnosis and treatment of brain diseases. It is an honor to have you on the show, Rima. And thank you for making yourself available. You're an extremely busy person. I can't think of anybody else who is as busy promoting and doing science. So let me jump right into it. And so you're the principal investigator for a very large consortium funded by the National Institutes of Health called the Alzheimer Gut Microbiome Project. And as we all know, there are currently no therapies to prevent or slow Alzheimer's disease progression, causing a huge socioeconomic burden and highlighting our incomplete knowledge. Your project that you're leading is not only, and this is really important that I want to emphasize here, is not only revolutionary in terms of its scope, the large number of participating research centers in North America and Europe, but also in its underlying philosophy. You've always emphasized that it is crucial to study the brain not in isolation, as has been done in traditional Alzheimer research, but in the context of peripheral influences, including diet, lifestyle, and microbiome. So if you want to make an initial comment just on that introduction that I gave and your different way of looking at this field and how you have put this consortium together and how you lead it.
Emran, first, I'm delighted to be a part of this important initiative that you are doing, and the education and the outreach that you are putting to the public at large, so that people can understand better how to manage their health and how to be aware and cognizant of major developments that are going on. If I may, I would like to comment a bit on the National Institute of Aging, which is a big institute within NIH. This is the funding agency that provides us with an ability to do big science, big data, bring artificial intelligence, informatics tools to understand each individual and the health of each individual. And then ultimately, of course, the health of the brain is at the heart of what we do within this National Institute of Aging. Back in 2012, with President Obama during his presidency, they put a task force and they put a mission to say, look, we have to be able to transform our understanding of Alzheimer's disease because all of the therapies that were tested kind of did not work. And at that time, we did not have the newly approved drugs, which are working. You know, we are happy to see something finally approved. They work marginally in, it's a beginning. Certainly doesn't cure the disease, certainly doesn't do what we needed fully to do, but it's a step forward. But the summary was that over 300 trials all failed, billions of dollars invested, and we did not bring together a good regimen for treatment of Alzheimer's disease. They wanted to shift the paradigm and said, listen, if we bring bright scientists from different fields, we put them together, we can create a new way of thinking about the disease where the big data, the powerful informatics tools, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data, and where the open science, where we stop working in silos as individuals, as labs, as PIs, as institutions, as departments. It's not going to move as fast, certainly, where we start to think about open science, collaborative science, good minds connect, data flows in a very efficient way because it's data coming in from the taxpayers. So we started on a mission back 2012 with the first summit, followed by subsequently by 3 summits that brought together non-profit of academia, non-profit organizations, for-profit organizations, advocacy groups, all together. Patients advocacy groups is critical, and all of this together to think as collectively together as new paradigms to change our thinking about brain health and about, of course, Alzheimer's disease being key and central. We wanted to flip the tables. We wanted to leave things on the table and bring people from outside the field to come in and weigh in and bring new thinking and let the big data speak. This is how I was brought into NIA, and I became one of the leaders of 6 consortia under Accelerating Medicine Partnership for Alzheimer's Disease, which is led by the Foundation NIH with great input from NIA and so on. So these big consortia, then each one of these PIs has, in my case, I have 60 scientists just engaged in the AMP-AD, where we all bring different big data. Big data, in my case, I am interested in metabolism, metabolic health. Brain metabolic health is key and vital, has been a theme for me. So I brought in the metabolomics as big data. Others brought in proteomics, genomics, informatics, and together we were put in a field so that we can collaborate, exchange, accelerate quickly, and most importantly, make our data public in real time. This has never happened before. In science, people are a bit territorial because of the nature of the funding. We would like to get funding, do everything we can, accelerate as much as we can, and then make our results available. We are pushing the boundaries to a new level. Not only do we want to be able to do great science, we want to be able to put all of our data out there so others can also use this data and accelerate very much the discovery process. So that was a transformative step. Yes. Number 2, it became okay and important then to bring the nonprofit for-profit in a setting. We do not know how to develop drugs. We are great scientists in academia, but putting with us people who can think drug discovery, can focus our discoveries into a path that can lead to accelerated drugs. So this was really a fantastic model under this AMP-AD with 6 consortia then coming together and say, listen, we're going to learn together. Each one of us is funded in a significant way, but the data is out there and together we are going to learn. The other important thing is that in my case, I'm interested in metabolic health. I want to be metabolically healthy. I want to be able to learn about my health in real time. The genome can give me a susceptibility to develop different diseases, including Alzheimer. But it's not the whole story. The most interesting thing is that the lifestyle, how I live, where I live, the air I breathe, the water I drink, the diet I consume, right? All of this, plus my gut microbiome that produces, right? These thousands, if not hundreds of thousands and millions of chemicals, as we are learning, this bacteria in the gut completes my metabolism. It's my partner in shaping my metabolic processes, whether it's in health or in disease. So imagine if if I have X number of thousands of chemicals, the bacteria can access it, further metabolize it, and produce in my bloodstream thousands of chemicals, if not much more, probably, I'm sure it's much more. And these chemicals become part of me. The most interesting discoveries we had is that many of these chemicals can go to different parts of the body, including the brain. Some of it is good, some of it is not good, right? And we are going to talk a bit about the gut microbiome later and Alzheimer's, but it became then important as just as in framing the topic, is that the bacteria cannot be ignored. So the bacteria is influencing my metabolism in profound ways, right? And that affects brain metabolic health. The diet, the exposome, the things we take from chemical exposures, and my lifestyle, socioeconomic status, then all of these together, we called them the exposomics, the things that come from the outside and affect my brain on top of my genome. So we flipped the paradigm 10 years ago, at least within my consortium, and we said it's critical and important if I want to be able to live a healthier life, and I cannot change my genome readily, I want to be able to change other things, whether it's the diet, the lifestyle, the gut microbiome, all of these other things that affect my metabolic health. Perhaps if I understand it and map it, I can and monitor it, I should be able to do at least change the modifiable things, right, in my life. So it became important as we studied the first phase and the second phase of this AMP-AD, and I mapped thousands of chemicals. And I looked at the relationship between these chemicals and cognition and brain imaging changes. What is changing in the brain? How early? When do these metabolic alterations start to happen in Alzheimer's patients? We discovered that it starts to change very early on. It really is important. It changes early, and some of these early changes could potentially be causative. If metabolically I'm not well, the brain metabolically is part of the body, influenced by the liver and the gut and the diet. Therefore, the brain is not metabolically also well. And the important findings over 10 years was that a lot of these metabolic signals in the blood correlate and tell me something about my brain metabolic health and about the brain imaging changes in my brain and about the deposition of A beta and tau in the brain, and also importantly about mood. We do not want to forget that there are mood changes in patients with Alzheimer's disease. They get depression, they get anxiety, they get sleep disruption, as do many other patients with neuropsychiatric diseases. So the paradigm shifted in studying the brain in isolation. We spent too much money studying the brain. We focused far less on all of these other influences that affects us as an overall integrated system. And we forgot that the brain is strongly connected with the rest of the body. Therefore, that was a beginning of saying we need to fund the gut microbiome, the diet affecting the gut microbiome, changes in gut microbiome during aging. So we start to understand these critical contributors to my overall metabolic health in health and disease. And the big investment in the Alzheimer's gut microbiome project was specifically to try to understand this bacterial human co-metabolism, the production of big array of chemicals in the blood that can cross the blood-brain barrier or influence the brain and metabolism on the brain. And that is part of our mission.
So what you explained in these 10 minutes is obviously a description of a revolution. I mean, it's not, so listeners who are not involved in this kind of science, they will not grasp the importance and so the novelty of this. I mean, it's essentially turning traditional science, linear causal relationships between like in the microbiome, in the traditional way of studying microbes, like one microbe would interact with one receptor on one type of cell and cause damage. This is fundamentally different. So this is sort of really as if you started a new kind of science, and applying this to a field that so far has escaped. It's one of the few things that has totally escaped any attempt of
Yeah.
traditional medical science and medicine to make progress. So I guess you had one help, that it was so ineffective what we've been doing up to now, that the NIH was willing to fund something way outside the box.
Way outside the box. Emran, I salute truly the visionaries within the National Institute of Aging that were willing to take the risk, and also support from the government and the Congress and so on, that said, listen, it's time to think outside the box, because thinking inside the box did not take us far in coming up with effective therapies, not only for Alzheimer's, but truly across neurodegenerative and psychiatric diseases. And you eloquently all described in many of your preaches, I feel, I eat well, I feel well, I have a gut feeling, I have something. We forgot that these are all interconnected processes. And the thing that we brought to the table is that metabolism, my metabolic health, captures and tells me something about all of these effects together. The gut, the diet, all of it affects at the end the deck of cards that I have to thrive on, which are the chemicals in my body, which is the thousands of chemicals we study that we call the metabolome, that basically is my metabolic processes. The other thing we forgot that was so basic was that the brain truly is interconnected and is sensitive. They wanted us to study the brain and the CSF, this fluid connected with the brain, and we discovered that the blood has far more information than the CSF because it is connected. It captures the liver and the gut and the diet and how I live. All of this then, that is transformative. And that is where NIH is today, and NIA in particular, in saying we ignored this. We ignored the issues among diverse populations. We ignored the issues of the socially, economically disadvantaged. All of this, we kind of said maybe we should look at it. It became central in thinking about, listen, getting a readout. We need to accelerate this readout, a chip to tell me something quickly about my health in real time, and to tell me about the disadvantages that some people have. That is critical, and to be able to help them out. Yes, it is critical to get information that we can disseminate, where we can tell them something actionable that can make them change their lives. So a big part of what I do is to empower the individual, the patient, and hopefully before they become patients, to be able to sustain an individual in good health for as long as possible. That's easier than trying to treat a disease. We call this proactive health.
So you mentioned something earlier about early intervention before any manifestations of Alzheimer's disease, any cognitive compromise. I mean, there's a lot of discussion recently about the manifestations of cognitive decline or physiological cognitive decline. So I think this is kind of a hot topic. But you mentioned something about how there's an early onset, and we've learned something also in Parkinson's disease that the disease may start 15 years before the first neurological signs. How early do you think, or do we have any evidence for that? How early do the changes in Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline happen? Is that in middle age, or is that even younger?
Who knows how early, but it's interesting in big studies. So we are connecting the dots between very large initiatives instead of each of us studying alone. Talking to the people who study longevity and wellness, people who study the centenarians. So some of us live well and they live well for a long time. Some of us are highly susceptible, and in their 40s, 50s, they start to get compromised. So we started to build bridges among all of these big consortia, so we can learn something about aging and the process of aging leading to Alzheimer's, or leading to continued wellness, and be able to share data, exchange big data, right? And data not only on our genetics, but also now on our gut microbiome, on that imprints my, every time I look at my metabolism, the bacteria's products are there. Of course, they are part of what I look at. And they are between the food and the gut bacteria and all of this, these are top signals that seems to affect my cognition. Whether they are bile acids indoors, there's a lot of bacterial products that we were able to show end up in the brain and end up modifying cognition and mood. I think the mood is a big thing, anxiety and mood. Critical. These are there and they affect the brain in profound ways. So we are putting an atlas, a roadmap. What are these influences? How do they interconnect? And how can we modify things based on an atlas and based on knowledge about aging, right? Not only in Alzheimer's, as you said, I want to step back. So I would say our data suggests there are changes early on. So by studying subjects who are enrolled in landmark studies, such as the Framingham, our landmark study in Framingham here in the Massachusetts, or the Rotterdam study in the Netherlands, these are studies that continued over generations. So the most interesting thing is that now we can do a metabolic profiling, measure thousands of things in the blood before, when the patients were still, when the subjects were healthy and cognitively, and when some of them became inflicted with a cognitive decline and became Alzheimer's patients. So imagine then the power of not only studying Alzheimer's patients in the ADNI, in these big studies of Alzheimer's, but we are also looking at population studies to say, now I know I have a roadmap. I know what is changing in Alzheimer's. I can take this knowledge back and profile subjects in these large community studies across years prior to symptoms. And there is where we are going to start to learn, what are these changes? Did they truly happen? Did they inform me about changes that will happen 10 years later in the brain or in cognition? And if so, which part of it, by building big databases on gut microbiome, databases on foods and food components, and databases on the exposome, we can start to tease apart out of these signals we are seeing in the blood. Does it come from the gut bacteria? Does it come from diet? Does it come from the chemical exposome or the genome? And by profiling brains later on in Alzheimer's patients, we are also confirming that these chemicals are in the brain and they contribute truly or correlate with these changes that happened. So we are making our way with supervisionaries within the National Institute of Aging to connect the dots between large initiatives, large groups of researchers. None of us can do this alone.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, listening to you and having, listening to you also in these regular meetings of the consortium, which I find absolutely fascinating. You would think with this new approach, you're just steps away from a major breakthrough that has escaped any of the simplistic approaches so far. One big obstacle that I see, and I was curious to hear your view on this. These are obviously massive amounts of data. It's both the data that are being generated by the 40 or so or more participants in these consortia, but also from a genetic standpoint, from a microbial, from a metabolite standpoint. I don't think science has ever dealt with these massive amounts of data. And do you believe that ultimately the only way to make sense out of all this information is applying AI to it? Or do you think that any human brain can actually grasp what's going on this wide range, from populations to molecules, essentially?
I look at a very good question, Imran. I look at the complexity, and I'm certainly not an expert in all of this. I'm someone who saw the vision, was able to get great minds together and to embark on something that is so so ambitious. But I would say, out of all of the things we do, the most difficult thing, bottleneck always, is to take this big data, sort it out, so we understand within each individual what is going on. So I would say the artificial intelligence, these incredibly powerful tools, and to be able to recognize patterns within big data, right, is something that has happened, of course, in medicine with the processing imaging data. where yes, we do have incredible pathologists who can look at an imaging data, but we have machines now that can look at it with far more power to look for things that are discrete and things that, an eye cannot see alone or an individual cannot see alone. So we know that the artificial intelligence made a huge impact in saying, listen, we are not bashful in using artificial intelligence to look at and make better sense out of imaging data. I think that for all big data in science, as we are producing big data in diseases and so on, bringing the artificial intelligence is the key, fundamental and profound steps that can enable us to make sense of the big data. So I'm all for it and eager to learn and eager to engage the brilliant minds and the brilliant people who developed all sorts of tools so that they can enable us use AI tools to look at this big data.
Yeah, so the other question, so I'm partly optimistic that we're close to a breakthrough in Alzheimer's, but also in other mental disorders, applying, hopefully many investigators who are capable of doing this, will adopt this approach, and NIH will be preferentially funding those kind of studies. We always run into this. So the traditional NIH funding was on so-called R01 grants, which typically allow you to study 100 or maybe 200 patients, which in some ways is almost become obsolete. I mean, unless you want to identify a very specific mechanism. But on the other hand, I'm skeptical because that task is so daunting, and I personally am not an AI expert, so I can't even judge. People always say this is moving all exponentially. So I think there's two views on this. I think it's the only way forward, but how long it will take before we get the big breakthroughs now. And it may not be just a single medication as we have. So, I mean, there will also probably be a paradigm shift in the development of therapies. There will be disease treatment programs, integrated programs, and not just one chemical that the pharmaceutical industry will come up with.
Yeah, I think Imran, time will tell how impactful this artificial intelligence is going to be with big data in the understanding of human diseases. But I would say it's a sequence of events. But the big data on its own, and even with the more simplistic approaches of the mining of the data that we are using today, it is becoming clear that chemicals produced by bacteria are influencing our mood, are influencing our, anxiety is a big topic, cognition. So we are seeing already now, right, and trying understanding metabolic failures and seeing their trajectory, where I believe we are going to break away from just the A beta and the tau pathology hypotheses and be able to install better wellness and resilience, even in individuals who are susceptible, by number one, identifying who they are, helping them with simple tests, and by measuring thousands of chemicals, I hope we can make it cheaper, accessible, so we can have monitors. And this digital medicine is incredible, where we should be able to monitor health in a much more effective way. But the message there is that we are already seeing really transformative ideas in terms of how metabolism and this big data can give us access to knowledge we never had before, approaches that can help us endow resilience. I think we will see how effective we are in developing paradigms of interventions, where metabolically we can guide someone by changing their diet and giving them the right supplements and the right maybe drugs that can adjust metabolism. We should be able to come up with different paradigms to treat Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety, for sure. And I'm convinced this will happen. But of course, the artificial intelligence, I think, is yes, futuristic, yes, there, but it's a way. We'll see how much it can help. But I think the no way back is to go with one hypothesis at a time and one target at a time. We did this for too long. In studying Parkinson's and Huntington's, I was studying those diseases before. It's hard. One target and one enzyme and one process. This is not how the body works. We have an integrated system, an integrated metabolic network that is one. You affect one thing, you affect a whole array of things. Therefore, our simplistic view of developing drugs, blinded, where we go with the treating an average, assuming all patients are the same, and targeting an individual who is an average, is truly going to transform and change. It has to change. And this big data is already showing us we can stratify who are these individuals who look alike, who are these individuals who might have common disease mechanism and can be treated with certain drugs better in a more effective way than others. I think this has already become now very clear, even for pharmaceutical companies that were hoping to treat with one pill all population of a disease. They are seeing it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It might by miracle, but most likely, right, there is a need to stratify and treat groups of individuals.
So, Rima, we have to interrupt it quickly because I have this 40-minute time limit here. This is what I was struggling in the beginning. So if you could turn off and then turn back on the same way you got on the first time, then
we'll continue.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do that. Yeah.
Okay, welcome back. Yeah, great conversation so far, I have to say. It's I mean, I hope everybody else is as excited. Whenever I listen to you, it's just it just feels good because you feel this is the way forward in science in general, and it's hopefully all our young scientists and even physicians are being educated in the same way. I think that usually will take a while because, before he gets into medical school curricula, it takes between 5 and 10 years. This one will go faster, and hopefully then. So a couple of follow-up questions. So this is about longevity. You mentioned this briefly before, and health span and centenarians. So there's been a lot of talk, and I think a lot of people are kind of assuming or buying this argument that with the world population getting older, there's going to be more and more cases of Alzheimer's disease because it's a necessary consequence of getting older that we develop cognitive decline. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, clearly, I think we are aging because of all of the developments scientifically and clinically. People are aging and aging much longer than before. And clearly with this comes problems with cognitive function, and the incidence for Alzheimer's disease will increase. So the issue then becomes, Ian, again, as connecting communities of researchers, as I mentioned, we cannot just study Alzheimer's, we have to go back in time, and we need to partner, and we are partnering in our next phase of this Alzheimer's gut microbiome project with these teams that are studying aging, longevity, resilience, centenarians, all of us together, and the people who are studying Alzheimer's, which is the disease. We want to be able to sit around the table, exchange data and information, try to understand out of the things that are affecting our brain, from the diet, the gut microbiome, the genome, the exposure. We want to put this information in and look at those individuals who are aging very well, who are resilient. They can avoid development of disease. They live well. We want to learn something about them. We want to bring this information, inform us about what we are seeing in Alzheimer's disease that could go wrong in an opposite direction. Putting all of this data in and learning about it collectively and together is going to be able to accelerate our understanding of the influences, again, of the gut microbiome, of the metabolism in general. Yes, who are the people who age well, and how can we make those who are susceptible, again, change paradigms, right? Whether we try to help them change their gut microbiome, not trivial, but of course we are all on a mission to say, if this bacteria is my partner and is completing my metabolism, producing half of the things at least of what I'm producing, and they become part of my bloodstream, part of my deck of cards that I'm using, then it becomes important to say, can I endow some resilience? Can I avoid? Can I delay? But you need all of these groups to share the data, number one, And therefore, the open science paradigm within NIA, this National Institute of Aging, I hope it becomes propelling across all NIH. So every tax dollar that is paid for science dictates that a scientist has to share. It's no more about me and no more about the I and no more about my my team or my department nor my institute nor my program. It's truly about making an impact on the disease. And we need to find the right incentives for the scientists because we worry about the young investigators who come to me and they say, listen, we put our blood, sweat, and tear into this. We produced big data. Yes, and here it is. The minute I can see this data is when everybody else can see it at the same time and can compete with me. And yes, there are others who are going to grab this data without understanding its intricacies, use it and publish before us. It happens and it will always happen. So we are advocating within NIH metrics and measures of reward as we are changing the paradigm of how we do science and how we leverage the taxpayers' money to say, listen, we are going to open and adopt this open science, adopt and encourage partnerships. And instead of having 4 people on a manuscript, let's have 20, 30, 100. What's wrong with that? It's good. As long as we can find a metric and a measure of reward that differs from just a simple H index. And the debate is ongoing. The debate is ongoing. That's the only way to accelerate, I think, truly scientific discoveries and translation.
And these changes will have to trickle down to, you know, departments of institutes and you know and departments, because clearly promotion is still based on, you know, first or last author. It's not based on that you somewhere in the middle of 25, 50 people. So
exactly.
So this will force changes on a wide range of aspects in scientific progress.
We are living it, Amran, we are living it as we speak. And I think there's a force indeed to revise our matrices that we have adopted for too long, including how we publish papers, because now we are putting our scientific manuscripts in real time, right? As the science evolves, we are putting it in bioarchive. And maybe the physicists were smarter than us and adopted this way before us, you know, in the 30s and 40s. Now we are saying, and we have a mandate with NIA that says, listen, instead of having two people judge my scientific manuscript, let everyone vote on it. Yes, no. If Amazon asks people to vote on a product, and there's 100 to 1,000 people who can vote on something. So the whole way of doing science, evaluating science, making science and findings accessible is all changing in some significant ways. And I like this change, and I'm living it. It's not easy. We were not trained as scientists to be that open, that collaborative, that sharing, and we do not have the reward mechanisms that can make people comfortable to live in this new environment, but it's going to happen.
No, if I ask you a personal question, you know, I mean, it's absolutely amazing to me to watch you to direct, you know, this consortium and hold everything together and know every detail of every investigator around the world, essentially. How did you get to that point? I mean, what is when it's different in your career and in your upbringing from so many other, from the great majority of other scientists?
A topic dear to my heart. So I always say this and people laugh. I said, listen, what contributed to a scientist that is more visionary, more interconnected, more able to understand people and differences and stuff, and be able to work with 120 scientists with different backgrounds and egos and institutions and languages and countries? So I say, number one, I lived as a global citizen. I'm Jordanian. I grew up with a brilliant father who was a physicist, an amazing physicist who ended up in banking, but a brilliant physicist who taught me how to think, really, who taught me about a connected universe. Walking at the Corniche in Lebanon, in Beirut, there was a beautiful Corniche by the waterfront. So I saw an interconnected by walking with him, learning about the laws of nature and physics. And I was able to see as I walked through and as my mind started to evolve, to see an interconnected universe. Wow. So I see that my ability to see biology, chemistry, and all of this and an interconnected body came from the childhood, and also some mentoring with amazing people, a Nobel Prize laureate at Hopkins, amazing pioneers at Harvard, at MIT, later on shaped and refined and mentored, and wonderful partners also at the Duke Medical System, all collectively and together. I think they shaped a type of a mind, and then growing and traveling throughout the universe, the globe. I learned how to respect and deal and interact with different people. And that is why I became passionate about making sure my consortium and my initiative is inclusive with different people we have Dutch, we have people from England, from Canada, from UK. We have a lot of people with different backgrounds. I think being a global citizen and my younger age, being mentored by a brilliant physicist, helped shape the mind to see something different and work in a different way.
I mean, I love the story that, you know, as you know, I'm also a huge fan of this philosophy of interconnectedness. And that's when I heard your first talk at an NIH meeting. I mean, that's really, you know, kindled my interest in getting to know better. And it sort of was the beginning of our relationship.
And we are so lucky to have you on board with these incredible minds to inspire us from the pioneering work that you personally have done. Truly, the other thing people forget that it is really scientific discoveries built. It is a continuum. No one person makes a big impact on their own. It's a continuum of building on foundations. And I admire so much everything you have thought about, articulated, promoted. We are lucky to have you on board, Amran.
And a big responsibility that I feel to really promote this, and this is why we're doing this podcast, to promote this to the lay public as well, because, you know, there is, as you know, sort of a latent anti-scientific movement. People sort of, you know, in particular with vaccines and all this. I think it's important that the lay person knows what exciting things are going on and how this will transform their own lives. And yeah, just want to use a couple of examples. So unfortunately, we have several friends that have developed the first signs of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. And when you see this firsthand and interact with people that were your close friends, and all of a sudden they're not exactly the same anymore, do you think, I mean, what would be the message be that if the spouse of somebody like that would ask me, you know, so what's going on? Is there anything optimistic that I can tell my affected spouse? You know, what will happen in the next few years?
I think there's a lot going on that is really going to be impactful and translatable in the not too far future. So the first message I would say is a message of hope that this big data and the big investments that were already made is already helping us in profound ways to think about tangible things. Not only do I want to develop a drug for A beta tau, I want to develop something, right, that can slow progression of the disease, that metabolically can keep me healthy. And if you ask someone like Dean Ornish, he's going to tell you, I even want to revert these metabolic aberrances and problems. So can we truly revert is the ultimate goal. Can I stop it is the second best thing. So I am hopeful as we are mapping hundreds of thousands of data points and chemicals and processes from metabolomics, from proteomics, from the genetics, with the imaging, and with these powerful informatics tools. I would say that translatability of this, if we are placed with the right pharmaceutical companies, so we can change the paradigm of how companies, we saw how quickly a vaccine was developed. Yes, we lived in a crisis. We saw what breaking the mold and breaking the FDA approval process, right? Opening minds to say, listen, we're gonna change, make a change. I see this as potentially applicable also for Alzheimer's disease. Why not? Yes, if we can say, listen, we are going to partner, we are going to give confidence to the regulatory agencies, and we are going to partner with the pharmaceutical companies so that we remove some of the rigid systems and enable this acceleration. Why do I have to wait 10 years to see an effect of a compound in a clinical trial in Alzheimer's, which is long, or 5 years, whatever. I want to know now, is there something that I can glean within a month, 2 months, quickly? Am I reverting? Am I making someone metabolically more better, right? Is this starting to change some? And we are seeing it with something like the ketogenic diet. You mentioned, we are looking, part of our program under this Alzheimer's gut microbiome project is to study the influences of the diet on the gut microbiome, on the metabolism, and link all of this to imaging and cognition. We are doing it with the Mediterranean, with the ketogenic diet, and with lifestyle and diet, Mediterranean, in the pointer, this huge pointer, which is a subdivision of the finger study that started in Finland, that got adopted globally. Yeah, where they see maybe it's better than any pill that is used today, is to change your lifestyle and your diet and so on. You change the course of the disease. So here came a study that we have done with in our consortium, the U19, in partnership with Dr. Susan Kraft, where she had done a study in the MCIs, mild cognitively impaired individuals, early changes in Alzheimer's disease, and they put them on a ketogenic diet, yes, and or they put them on a low-fat diet, which is more of the American heart diet. The most remarkable things, bringing now big data. If I look at this just clinical outcome, it's low, the ends are small, but there's definitely interesting impact, for example, of the ketogenic diet, as was noted, maybe more so in epilepsy earlier on. But we did a molecular mapping of the ketogenic diet. Basically, we asked in these individuals who were put on the ketogenic diet and those who were put on the low-fat diet, we measured 1,000 lipids. We put a roadmap, an atlas of what happened to lipid metabolism in these individuals. Did they all change their metabolism in the same way? Not really, right? And there is a big initiative now in the 1 million cohort in the All of Us initiative to focus on diets and variations among individuals. How do we respond to diet? Yeah, and how does our metabolism change and our gut bacteria change? So we mapped the gut bacteria and we mapped the metabolism in those who were treated with the ketogenic diets. We saw that the ketogenic diet has a profound effect on lipid metabolism. Incredible. One of the strongest things I have seen is you put someone on a ketogenic, they shift their lipid metabolism. Number two, it shifts it in a good direction. All of these problems I see in Alzheimer's patients, not all, but a good part of the metabolic problems are starting to revert in the right direction. We're not going to fix everything in one step, but we see that at least we are shifting metabolism that might correlate with some improvement in cognition, right? So a beginning of saying, like, with this big data, with the powerful informatics tools and AI, might start to help us glean who is responding, how to a specific diet. And certainly, if I want to improve my brain and my metabolic health, I want to do what's good for me, right? It's not only the average, it's what's good for me based on my genetic makeup, my bacteria composition in my gut, and all of this. So we are looking at each individual now and asking, can I look into these changes? What diet is best for me? And if I am one of these participants in this trial who are changing their lipid metabolism in the right way, and I'm benefiting from it metabolically, I can know this very quickly, in a week or two. So we can accelerate, condense a bit clinical trials, put ourselves in a crisis mode similar to what we were living in the COVID-19. Why don't we make it a model to transform paradigms and ways in which we can accelerate and work and partner with the regulatory agencies so that we can make an impact? Yes, so imagine then if the diet and the gut microbiome are things we can modify and supplements, not only. So if we think about the future, I don't only want to take a pill for Alzheimer's. I want to be, and this is what NIA is pioneering, again, visionary. We want to be able to change the lifestyle, the diet, and we want to be able to use medications and supplements. So a good theme of the summit, the Alzheimer's Summit for this year, that is going to take place a bit later in September, is to be able to put the theme that treatment thinking forward is and must be a combination approach where I can modify my diet, my lifestyle, right, and my supplements, my all of this, plus maybe take a pill or so. Collectively, this is the new paradigm of reprogramming who am I as an individual to a better state. Another transformative step.
I think I mean, we could go on for a long time. I always get energized just listening to you. I always refer to you as a force of nature, when I'm exposed to your lectures and talks, it's really energizing. But I think it's a good, this optimistic note is a good way to end this conversation. Hopefully we'll have another opportunity to do this in the future with updating, the audience on a lot of the progress that's happening. And I want to thank you again. I mean, both for, having me part of this consortium, but also for taking the time to answer some of these questions and tell in a very enthusiastic and very easily intelligible way, how rapidly things are changing. And
Emran, I thank you for this wonderful opportunity, and I thank you for this incredible partnership. And I think we need to really translate this to the public and the patients and the individuals. They are our partners, right? We need to be able to work together jointly and collaboratively and be able to translate back and forth, because that is the true force of nature that will impact the disease, is these partnerships between the public, private, regulatory, drug developers, right, agents, all of us together is the way forward. I thank you for allowing me to share a bit of a synopsis. And next interview, I hope we will have results that can that are translatable, where we are showing an impact to the patient and where we are engaging also with patient advocacy and patients. I thank you so much, Emran.
Great.
And
Thanks again.
best wishes. Thank you.